everything that we do is as a community. It's not it is truly we with Nashville Fashion Week. And what really differentiates what we do is the fact that we have the Nashville Fashion Forward Fund. So every time you buy a ticket, every time you sponsor us, every time you make a donation, it really does impact the future of fashion in Nashville. So we're very thankful for all of your support. And we're also very thankful for our friend, mentor, Fern Mallis, who I have to say shepherded this whole wonderful circumstance that's happening right now. So Connie and I have to go to Oz Arts Nashville now to prepare for 10 emerging designers. Some of you are here tonight. And so we have a runway show to go to. So without further ado,
we'll see you there.
Fern Mallis.
Well, thank you, Connie, and thank you, Marcia. Don't you love that they're off to Oz? There's just something magical about going to Oz to put on a fashion show. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. I am delighted to be back here for my third time to Nashville Fashion Week, and I can't believe how much has been going on in the city since I've been back a couple of years. Everywhere I look, there's new restaurants, new buildings, new development. I mean, this is such a happening city. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's a very cool place. So kudos to all you for making this your home. But today we're going to talk a little bit and have a conversation with the extraordinary and very impressionable Anna Sui, who is a fashion force. She's a native of Detroit. She attended Parsons School of Design in New York and designed for several sportswear companies before starting her own collection in 1981. She has produced runway shows every season for over 30 years that take you on a 17-minute trip, each one of them, from the music, which makes her shows seem like an MTV video, to the clothes, the set, the accessories from head to toe. And oh, the models. She always manages to have the hottest, most talked about, and most gorgeous girls work for her. This past season in New York, both Gigi and Bella Hadid opened her show, each walking on a parallel runway at the same time. Everybody went, oh, like it was crazy. Her show is always a happy time. It's a happy show. And she has shown in the tents in Bryant Park, which was my old stomping grounds. For the very first season, we set them up and was there twice a year for the entire time I was involved for 19 years. Today, there are over 50 Anna Sui boutiques in 8 countries, in addition to her collections being sold in 300 stores in 30 countries. There are 20 Anna Sui mini shops in Japan, and Anna Sui Beauty, with the coolest packaging, is featured at over 200 counters worldwide. She's collaborated with companies such as Target, Tumi, Coach, and Hush Puppies, and has recently launched her book, which was outside. I hope some of you were able to buy it. And Anna's book has a preface by Jack White, your local hero, who was a very dear friend of Anna's. But rather than me telling you more and more about Anna, we'll let her share her story and her passions, and most of all, her love of rock and roll. So Anna, welcome to Nashville.
Thank you, Fern. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you for having me today.
This is your first trip here.
It's my first time here, first time in Tennessee, and I'm so excited to be here.
So let's give her a nice welcome. So music has always been an integral part of your life and work. At what age did you get turned on by music?
Well, I grew up in Detroit, and when I was a kid, my brother was going to concerts, and he would take me along to like the outdoor concerts because I wasn't old enough to go to the venues. And we saw bands like MC5, Iggy and the Stooges, Alice Cooper. And then when I got older, there were all those British bands coming through. Like every band came through through Detroit. So it was just what I loved.
It was the other music scene in America. It was Detroit always growing up. Motown.
Motown, definitely.
So who were your early favorites?
Well, I guess Iggy, and I think that maybe I loved the Beatles. I remember fighting with my brother over the television. He wanted to watch the Tiger game, and I wanted to watch the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. I won.
Good.
So, and I think that changed our lives. And I just remember being so interested in what was going on in England, seeing not only the bands, but also their girlfriends and what they were wearing. And suddenly there were all these new designer names, Biba, Mary Quant, and then Twiggy came along and had her own collection. So all those things were so impressionable to me.
Great. How do you select the music for your shows? And how important is it to the collection? Does the sound come first or the collection?
Well, as I'm working on a collection, I try to transport myself. So I'm listening to music that evokes the theme. The collection that you'll see at Third Man is inspired by the Counter Couture exhibition that was at MAD Museum. And it was really kind of all the cult designers of the 60s, people that handmade, did embroidery, batik. And so I watched like a lot of videos of that period, did a lot of research, and listened to like all those bands. So I want the audience to experience the same thing that I'm going through, because I think that it's a show. Like, you have to transport your audience. You have to take them on that same journey that you've been through for 6 months. But you've got 17 minutes to do it.
What do you listen to at home? Do you have music playing all the time?
Well, lately I found this great jazz station, and I'm obsessed because I know nothing about jazz. I don't know what's good jazz, bad jazz, the correct jazz. I don't know, but this station is so informative because they go through some really obscure musicians.
Is this on Sirius?
No, it's just on FM radio.
Okay.
Like, I think it's 90. I think it's. I just discovered it like flipping around, and they weekly they explore one musician after another, and so it's just interesting, not knowing who they are, but like kind of falling in love with their music.
Interesting. How often do you have music obviously playing in all your stores? Do you change that seasonally, or how does that happen?
We do. My brother Eddie, who's going to be here shortly, he loves putting together the music. He follows bands because he's in Detroit and he still goes to so many concerts. Plus he's got Sirius radio, so he's constantly hearing new bands, new music. And he's the one who kind of tells me about bands like, oh, you're really going to love this one, like Sunflower Beat. Like, she has done my shows, Julia Cummings, for 2 seasons now.
Do you all know who that is?
They have a new album
I
that
don't.
just came out. She came to everyone's attention when she modeled for Hedy Slimane for YSL. But she's got this great rockin' band and a great look, and so she's modeled twice for me.
Fantastic. Let's go back a little again then. You grew up in the suburbs of Detroit. Mm-hmm. I remember your dad worked in the design department at General Motors.
Well, he was a structural engineer, and his first assignment was the GM Tech Center.
The Tech Center.
So when I did the car for GM, I brought my parents with me, and my dad knew everything about that building. And it's like an award-winning building. It had the first suspended steel, stainless steel staircase. I mean, it's like Funny Face, where there's that round room and there's all the doors, the color doors. I think they got it from that, because that's how it's designed on the design floor. And you go through, and it's where they make the models for the cars, where they develop the paint colors, where they work on the ads. So each room is a different department.
Interesting. When Anna says the car she did for General Motors, let me explain that to you. When I was at the CFDA, we had a huge fundraising initiative called Fashion Targets Breast Cancer. We were raising a ton of money for breast cancer. But General Motors was the title sponsor, and they had an initiative to work with us on this breast cancer initiative, and they created an initiative called Concept Cure, because at the car shows there's always a concept car. And for quite a few years, we would pick 5 designers each year, and each would be given a different General Motors brand, Buick and Oldsmobile, Cadillac, I don't remember the names of the other GM brands. And every year a designer got one of those cars, a brand new one. They went to Detroit to the design labs and were able to design it the way they wanted to. It had to fit certain restrictions so that you could literally drive it on the road, so it couldn't be quite too crazy. We had to pull back some designers' work, and each one did a car that totally personified their personality and their look. And it was an extraordinary campaign. And those cars were each eventually auctioned and sold, I think, on Rosie O'Donnell's show and in other different mechanisms and venues to raise a lot of money for breast cancer. I remember Anna's car had lots of black patent leather inside and like the gear shift. It was very black, it was very purple, like an iridescent purple, and patent leather mats on the floor.
And leopard carpet.
Leopard carpets.
Yes. And sandblasted roses on the windows. And pinstriping that was Art Nouveau on the outside of the car. It was stunning.
It was really stunning.
Yeah.
I mean, it was such a great creative campaign. I mean, you know, Betsy Johnson did like the dashboard and Swarovski crystals. You know, people did pink cars, and you know, they were just crazy. Joe Boxer did a car that was like all smiley faces and things. All I mean, it was such an exciting initiative. But your car, I remember that so well. So the GM, General Motors Detroit, came full circle back into fashion with all of us. So how old were you, though, when you knew you wanted to be a fashion designer?
When I was 4 years old, I was a flower girl at my aunt and uncle's wedding, and that was in New York. And on the way home, I told my parents, when I grow up, I'm going to move to New York and be a fashion designer. Not that I knew what it was, but it sounded good. And that was kind of my whole pursuit through my childhood and teenage years, is figuring out how could I be a fashion designer.
Well, was that because you didn't like the dress you wore or something?
No, I liked all my aunts had like matching shoes and jewelry to their gowns, and Chinese cheapaos, like they changed a few times. And I just thought, like, I want to do this. I want to like dress people. I want to figure out how you can make all these beautiful accessories matching the clothes. So it just became what I was obsessed with.
Did your parents like think that was cute, or they just dismissed that?
They dismissed it, and then when it was time to apply to college, I only wanted to go to Parsons because I had read an article about two young ladies that went to Paris, and Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton opened a boutique for them. And they had graduated from Parsons. So as a kid, you think, okay, all I have to do is go to Parsons. Years later, I went back and reread the article. Well, actually read it for the first time because I only looked at the pictures. And one of the young ladies, her stepfather was Irving Penn. So as a kid, you don't understand connections. You just think that you want to find the magic secret. So I think that, you know, that's why I always say live your dream, because I think dreams can go beyond any logic or anything anyone's going to teach you. Like, you have to have that aspiration and that goal in your own mind.
Well, you did that. Who were some of your fashion colleagues that you were in Parsons with at that time that we might know?
Well, my best friend still is Stephen Meisel. I remember meeting him in the lunchroom because design students were not allowed in the lunchroom. Like, you're supposed to spend all your time with design students, but I would sneak into the lunchroom. And he called me over one day and he said, why don't you come out dancing with us tonight? And so after that, it became like a regular thing. We would go out clubbing.
Was he just studying photography at Parsons?
No. He was studying fashion illustration.
Wow, okay.
He switched over to photography about 5 years later because he realized that illustration was going out. Like, people weren't hiring illustrators anymore.
That photography was where it's at.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Mm-hmm. Mark Jacobs went to Parsons, but of course I didn't know him. He's younger than me, and I remember him at Charivari and Fiorucci.
He was a stock boy at the Charivari store in New York.
Mm-hmm. Who else has gone to Parsons?
But in your classmates?
Yeah, Zach Carr. He worked for Calvin for many, many years.
People actually thought he was Calvin Klein. He designed everything.
Yeah, in fact, Zach is the one who gave me the best business advice ever. He lived on my block coincidentally, and I would see him from time to time, and he said, we have to have dinner. I'm a psychic, and I need to tell you something. And what he told me at dinner was that I had to open my own boutique, because he said, people don't get you. Like, they like what you do, but you can't sit next to Bill Blass, you can't sit next to Calvin Klein. You have to show them what you're about. You have to open your own boutique. So the very next day, I went down to Soho, and I found that boutique on Green Street.
Right after Zach told you that. That's great.
And that was the best investment of time, money, everything that I ever did, because for the 20 years that we were there, it just always made money. It was the best location in Soho.
That's true. And it really did position you and clarify and crystallize who you were.
Yeah, and gave me a chance to think about the purple walls, the red floors, the black lacquer furniture, which became just parts of my brand. It made a very identifiable brand out of my thoughts, and that became the packaging for the cosmetics, for the fragrances, and kind of my signature.
Absolutely. Well, you also were a big fashion fan, as you said earlier,
Totally.
wearing Norma Kamali and Ossie Clark and Biba and Zandra Rhodes. Tell us what it is about their clothes that you loved.
I think they were the rock stars' wives, designers of choice. And actually, my first apartment was on the block where Norma Kamali's first boutique was, and I would go in there and see like Bianca Jagger or Bette Midler, and it was just kind of like that's what you were aspiring to look like those women. And the first fashion show I ever went to was a Zandra Rhodes show in New York.
And you just had an exhibition in Zandra Rhodes' gallery in London, right?
Yes. The Fashion and Textile Museum was founded by Zandra Rhodes, and I was there looking at a Thea Porter show. She was another one of those designers that all the rock stars' wives wore. Elizabeth Taylor was her hugest patron. She made the beautiful caftans out of a lot of fabrics that you would find all over the world, mostly from the Middle East and India. And I knew nothing about Thea Porter except that I liked her clothes, and this whole exhibition kind of told you everything, and actually recreated her boutique. And when I was leaving, the director of the museum saw me in the bookstore, and we had coffee together, and by the end of the coffee, she asked me if I wanted to do an exhibition. Like, it was just something I had never dreamed of. You know, I'm not English. The English don't really know me that well, except for my fragrances. I think they know my fragrances more than my fashion.
That's great. And do you all know Zandra Rhodes' work?
She has pink hair.
Yeah, pink hair before anybody
before
else had
anyone.
pink hair.
Yeah.
And I think her clothing now is back on Farfetch, and she a
Yeah.
couple of seasons ago did all the fabrics for the Valentino show.
Yes.
I actually did a crossing on the Queen Mary about 2 years ago from England, Southampton to New York. It was their first ever Fashion Week crossing, and they called it that, and it arrived in New York the first day of Fashion Week. And I was a special guest, and Zandra was. And so Zandra did a fashion show on board, and Colin McDowell, the British journalist, and we had such a ball. And Zandra did all these beautiful drawings of the ship for me, and watercolor. Oh, she's
great.
She's quite spectacular.
Yeah.
When I was in my 20s, I always thought I was going to get married in a Zandra Rhodes dress. Never happened. Still time. Anyway, so the photographer, Stephen Meisel, who you mentioned, he has been a major player in your life.
Yes.
I mean, very significant to you. How would you say he's helped your career? Because he's really been a
He
mentor
really
and a
has.
partner.
You know, when Stephen switched over to photography, he would call me and say, "Can you come and bring some of your stuff and help me with these pictures?" So I ended up doing styling for him, and we did like a monthly thing with Franca Sozzani when she was running Italian Glamour, and so I got to be really friendly with Franca. In fact, she wanted me to be on staff, and she invited me to Italy and then to Paris, and I did some styling, and then I thought, it's only fun with Stephen. So, and I wanted to be a designer. So I didn't take up her offer. But I think that that connection helped me a lot when she got me a freelance work, got me a job in Italy, which I did for 7 years, and that helped finance my collection. Plus, she was very supportive and gave me tons of press. I think that, you know, when I started doing the fashion shows, Stephen was the first person that said, you have to do a show. We had gone to Paris, and
Tell us about going to the Gautier show.
Yes. So Stephen invited me to Paris, and our first stop was stopping at the Ritz to pick up Madonna. And
We're just going to pick up Madonna at the Ritz.
we walk into her room, and I'm like green with envy because there were racks and racks of clothes from every major designer in Paris, all these shopping bags. And she was getting dressed, and I was just like oohing and awing over all these clothes and things around her room. And she came out with her coat on. We jumped in the car because we were late, got to the show, and when she sat down, she took off her coat. She said, "Anne, I have a surprise for you. I'm wearing your dress." And so that was one of the things that gave me confidence to maybe I could do a show. And by the time we got back to New York, Stephen said to me, okay, it's your turn, you have to do a show. And
What was the dress she was wearing?
it was my black baby doll dress, which was a signature dress, black chiffon. There's famous pictures of her with her boyfriend, Tony Ward. Square neckline and it kind of A-lines, and it has a big bow on the back, and sheer sleeves. And for the pictures in interview, it was when we were in Paris, she borrowed all my jewelry that I was wearing, and they were these big Kenneth J. Lane cuffs and necklace. And so there's lots of photos of her in that.
It's not a bad way to start off a career, right? Oh, you want to see my client, Madonna, in my clothes? Okay, so describe your first runway show. Tell us about the inspiration, how you felt doing it in 1991.
1991. Again, when Stephen said, you have to do a show, I just thought, how can I compete? This is at the height of Versace, Chanel, all these like mega brands with zillions of dollars, and here I am like working out of my apartment, or just moved out of my apartment and working in a small studio. And he said, don't worry, I'll help you. And I was socially friends with Naomi and Linda and Christy, and they would come over always for birthday parties and dinners and things. So they said, we'll help you get girls.
We'll help you get girls. We are your girls.
Francois, again, was working with Stephen all the time. So he said he would do the makeup. And Garen was working with Stephen all the time, so he said he would do the hair. Somebody donated a space for us. It was a vacant showroom, and we did the show there. And backstage, Linda was helping the girls get dressed. She was like saying, come on, you have to be faster. This is Anna's show. And she was helping them like get their shoes on. And I mean, it was really a labor of love. And at the end, Paul Cavaco and I like looked at each other and we both just started crying because it was just such a labor of love.
And they all seem to be that, though, every one of your shows.
Thank you.
So it was after that show that you basically opened the store, though, right?
It was, yeah, it was because stores were coming to me, but they would say, we don't know where to put you. You know, you can't hang next to Bill Blass. Sometimes they would give me like the hallway and make a little shop for me there. And eventually they took the elements of the store and would build these little boutiques with the Tiffany lights, the red walls, red floors, purple walls.
Okay, so that was 91. And yes, we had your store in Green Street, and all your paper mache and black Victorian furniture and purple. What was the purple about? And
Yeah, it was a funny story. When I was a kid, I saw this Jerry Lewis movie, and the princess had a lavender Rolls Royce. And I thought, lavender, oh, that's cooler than pink. So that became my favorite color. So that birthday, I asked my mom to make a purple lavender dress for me, and then the cake had lavender roses, and it just was always my favorite color. And then when it came time to doing my apartment, because we had moved the business out of my apartment, Stephen and Paul were over, and they heard me on the phone with the contractor, and I was saying, yeah, I just want you to sand the floors and make them like blonde wood. And Steve's like, blonde wood, are you kidding? Get off the phone. And he's like, okay, what color floor would Vreeland have? And I said, red. He said, okay, so you're gonna have a red floor. So that became the color of my floor. And then I used that same thing for my boutique, like using it as a signature thing. But then I thought, well, white walls look kind of creepy. It's like after Christmas sale or something. So I thought, okay, lavender. And then the black lacquer came from, I went to the Salvation Army when I was a teenager and dragged home this beautiful old vanity, but it looked like it had been in a fire. It was kind of like all white with smoky smudges on it. And I painted it black lacquer. And I thought, okay, this looks cool. It looks Victorian. So that became my signature of finding old furniture and painting it.
Did you ever get to the point where you said, okay, now I'm ready for like modern Danish?
No. Although I like it, I love all that, but it's just, I think this is me.
And you're comfortable in it, and
Yeah.
it makes you happy. Okay, then your career really started to blossom and take off. In 92, you won the CFD's Perry Ellis Award for New Designer. Did that spark anything?
Well, again, I never expected it because, the designers at that time were here, and at that night, there was Versace got the award presented by Elton John. Karl Lagerfeld was there. I mean, like, these were the designers, and then here's me. It was just kind of unexpected, totally unexpected.
I remember that show well. I was already at CFDA when we produced that night.
And Stephen got an award that night too. Yeah.
It was a big family fashion night.
Yeah.
And then years later in 2009, which seems like still not that far along in your career, you won the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yeah.
That was pretty special.
Mm-hmm. And then the year after, I think Michael Kors got the award, and he came over to me and said, "We're the two youngest Lifetime Achievement Awards."
I know, it kind of feels like you're supposed to retire when you get your Lifetime Achievements. And then you won China Fashion Awards, and the Anna Sui Mini and Target collaborations happened. What were those collaborations about?
Well, Target, they wanted me to collaborate with a theme, and at that point, Gossip Girl was like the hottest thing. And so I had the idea that I would do designs for 3 of the main characters. And it kind of escalated to the point where for the boutique that they did a pop-up store, which was one of the first pop-up stores. They rented a whole building in Soho, and they fitted it out in purple and black, and there were different departments for Serena and Blair, and most of them came to the opening. Mm-hmm. So, and then the store sold out in one day, so they had to close it. There was no merchandise.
That was a very quick pop-up store. If you blinked, you missed it. Well, you've talked about some of the girls and the models, the Naomi, Cindy, Linda's. How important is it to have the right girls in a show, the right models? How does that make or break a show?
I think that because I started during the period of supermodels, they gave such an energy to the show. It was a very different moment. Like, you can see the difference when you go back and look at those runway shows compared to those like endless stomping girls with no expression. It's kind of like, I think it's time for it. It's time for it to switch back. And in fact, there was a really funny article about like a 10-year-old drag queen kid that had watched my videos from the 90s and did it for Gypsy Sport this last season.
Really?
Yeah, there was like a little blurb online about it, how he was so inspired by those supermodels.
Huh. No, I mean, it really, I mean, from an audience perspective, I mean, sometimes the supermodels would overpower a show because you'd be watching around, you'd just be talking about the models. But then there are times when they just completely create the show because they really get it, the clothes, it works for them, and it's a total package, and it makes a huge difference.
I think that's what they said to me. It's like, finally there's clothes for us, because they used to feel like they were wearing mommy's clothes. Mm-hmm. And so it was just kind of, everything kind of clicked at that point. And one of the other things that gave me the confidence to do the show was I noticed that summer that Linda and Christy and Naomi would come over wearing head-to-toe Versace or Chanel, and with every accessory and handbag. And then that summer, Naomi was wearing like flare jeans, and she had like on a vintage like lingerie top, and one of the models was making chokers. And suddenly I thought, maybe there's a place for me, because it's changing more to like what I do than what that power dressing was.
And how do you think about the new crop of models that are out now, like the Hadids and all the Jenners and that group?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a different time now. Like, you need that power of those women to...
on their Instagram accounts.
Exactly. And there's nothing like it. I mean, like, when you get a picture of them in your clothes, there's nothing like it. But also, Gigi and Bella have to be the two nicest models that I've come across, like, in a really long time. They are such genuinely nice ladies. And like, they got such a kick out of like coming out together. In fact, I gave them a video of an old show, like an old showroom show, because in the old days, that's how designers showed. They'd show in their showroom, and they'd have shows all day long, and there'd be a small audience around them. I think the Norel presentation that I saw you at, like, he was talking about how they would do one show in the daytime for the press and one black tie show at night. And there would be 4 models, and they would do the whole show with a 20-minute intermission where they would put on their evening makeup. I mean, can you imagine now? like how low production that was. So I wanted to capture some of that. So I showed them those videos, and they practiced doing the twirls, doing the kind of walk, and really showing the clothes, which models haven't done that in such a long time.
Yeah, that was lovely. It was a U runway, so there were 2 exit. Normally the girls just come out one, walk this way, but to open the show, because she's so smart, she had both girls come out at the same time, walk the 2 aisles, and it was quite fantastic.
Thank you.
People were like, oh, there's that one, there's that one. It's fantastic. Okay, do you want to talk about some of the other collaborations that you partnered with, Hush Puppies or Toomey, Coach?
It's so fun doing a collaboration because you're limited as far as what your production can do, what your contractors can do, and then suddenly there's something like Hush Puppies where they're open to anything, and I think we've really pushed them to the limit where we've created some like really amazing shoes where we've done our own prints, we've done color striped crepe platforms, and it started actually in the 90s when they came to me and we did the pastel shoes, and that kind of became geek chic, and that was like kind of a catchphrase, and we did all these beautiful colors like lavender and lime green and light blue. So I mean, they're just a fantastic company, and they're from Michigan. So again, it kind of comes full circle.
And what did you do for Starbucks?
Starbucks was fun too, because again, they wanted the DNA of Anna Sui, and there was one print that it's on the cover of the book that I think people always recognize as an Anna Sui print. It's striped with roses on the bottom, and we did coffee cups, ceramic coffee cups like that. We did swell bottles with them, but everything was black and white, purple and red. Again, I think that I can't emphasize enough that for a designer, you need that very identifiable brand icon. And I think that's been the success of all my fragrances and cosmetics and really any of the collaborations that I've done.
It's the consistency and staying on point.
And being very identifiably mine, not just, it could be anybody.
Great. So now that we're in Nashville, can you tease us a little bit about what people are going to see tomorrow night?
Well, this was the show that was inspired by the Counter Couture show that I mentioned. And, you know, in all the years that I love 60s fashion the most, I've never done like a pure 60s hippie show. And this one I just went full on hippie. One of the things in the exhibition were videos of communes. And they were shot so beautifully and very seductively that you almost wanted to join a commune. But then when you saw the reality of it, it was like, no way. But so we opened up the show that way, where there was a procession, and out came Father and all his brides, and it was kind of in the dark because in the video that I saw, it was at dawn. And so we just kind of had this blue light, and every model in the show came walking out and did the full U, and I think it was very dramatic and moving, and kind of again gave like a different feeling of production than just the stomping down the runway.
And everything, your accessories and shoes and hats and everything, is all sold each season in its totality.
Yeah. I don't have a shoe license, but I've been doing a collaboration with Bed Stew, and they do these beautifully hand-tooled shoes from Mexico, and everything's vegetable dyed, and they stain the colors to match the clothes. I've worked with Erickson Beeman since the first show. They do beautiful jewelry, and Karen insists on swatches of every single fabric, and she matches the jewels to all of the different prints and colors. And James Coviello, I've worked with since the first show, and he works on my knitwear and my hats, and has done even special things for me, like we did kind of a pantomime horse, where it's almost like it was like a stuffed animal, but you could wear it, and it was for the fairy tale collection, so the prince had to have a horse. So it was this horse that kind of sat on his shoulders, and it looked like a stuffed animal horse with a beautiful tail and a beautiful saddle. So, I mean, James can do anything. You just mention it, and he's just got these magic hands.
Is your collection, I should probably know this, available in Nashville?
It will be tomorrow.
Well, I know tomorrow she's doing a pop-up at Jack White's studio. Do you all know that? At what time
at
is
Third
that?
Man. I think it's at 2 o'clock. I think it's 2 o'clock. Yeah.
And what?
1 o'clock? No.
2 o'clock.
Okay.
What collection will be available there? What they
This
see
one,
on the runway
the one that
tomorrow
the one
night?
that I'm talking about, yes,
Okay.
and the one that's going to be on the runway, yes.
Fantastic. But any interest in opening a store in Nashville?
That would be fun. I mean, it's such a happening city.
It is. There's
Yeah.
lots of new buildings
Yeah.
and stores.
So I have to
Got some
kind of see
smart
different areas.
real
and-
estate person in the audience. Follow up with her. Okay, so I also read an interview where you listed a lot of interesting people. So I'm going to ask you these questions and see who comes to your mind first. Of curated list of your favorite things, places, and people. Your favorite cities.
London, Tokyo, and I also like going to a city that I've never been to, because you always learn something.
So we'll add Nashville to that
Nashville,
one. Okay.
yeah.
Movie stars.
I'm old school. I like Gary Cooper, Elizabeth Taylor. I mean, those were really stars.
Movie stars, yeah. Fashion designers.
I think we mentioned a few, Zandra Rhodes, Norma Kamali, and then I like Chanel. I like Yves Saint Laurent. I mean, I think that, again, there's so much to learn from everyone. Everyone has their own kind of like iconic take on clothing, and it's so inspiring to see how people, their thought process and how they put collections together.
Speaking of Saint Laurent, and I'm going to come back to this list, what's your take on the revolving door of all the designers at all these legendary houses?
Well, I think that it's a very challenging time now for not only fashion, but I think sports, movies, because everything has turned into such a big business that there's so much pressure on the creative side that I don't know that creatively you can ever satisfy that backer or that the money people, the numbers people.
Stockholders.
So I think it's really skewing creativity. I think that what we need are the merchants like Cal Ruttenstein, like Marvin Traub, that really believe in merchandise. We need the people that
People who touched clothing, didn't just look at spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need stores like the Charavaris, which was a great store in the 70s, where like it was a mother and a son and daughter, and they would go around to see every collection, and they would introduce new designers all the time. But it was a selection of love, not just because it was a guaranteed sale. They fell in love with the clothes. They fell in love with the designer. I think we're missing that.
They introduced Armani to America, I think, and all the Japanese designers
true,
and the Belgian designers.
That's true.
And
Yeah, that's the
everybody.
first place you could see
Selma,
the
John,
Japanese
Barbara.
designers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, everything's a pendulum, so it's going to swing another way. But right now, we're at the point where everything is just dictated by money and
social media.
and numbers. Yeah.
Okay, illustrators.
Well, Antonio is one of my favorites. I did a whole collection inspired by Antonio. He was so powerful in the 60s and 70s. I think that if you see his work, you'll recognize it. I think that's why Stephen wanted to be an illustrator. That was his idol. And not only did he draw beautifully, he discovered a lot of the top models of the 60s and 70s, like Donna Jordan, Jane Forth, who became like Warhol stars. He just had an eye and, again, a love of fashion and creating. And I think just to be with him, he would like recreate and redo and always photograph it and document it.
Photographers, I guess we know the top of that list.
Yeah, but I love a lot of the 60s photographers, Avedon and David Bailey. So Sarah Moon.
Artists.
I guess my favorite still is Warhol. I mean, as much as that sounds cliche, it's kind of like my generation came to New York to meet Andy Warhol. And that was possible because he was around. You'd go to Fiorucci and he'd be signing Interview. You'd go to a club and he'd be there with an entourage. You'd go to a restaurant and he'd be there again with another entourage. So, I mean, he was kind of like the epitome of cool. And everyone around him was kind of in this magic circle.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody have that kind of circle now? Anybody play that role?
No, again, I think it's turned into such a business thing with art. I don't know, nothing comes to mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the name of the hotel we saw today? It's an art hotel. 21 City Museum. You should try to see that. It's quite a remarkable hotel, just all about the artwork, and it's like staying in a gallery. It's very nice. Cosmetics?
Again, Biba. Biba was my big inspiration.
Biba.
When I was a kid, we would come into New York every summer, and Bergdorf had Biba at BG, and they had like the most dramatic counter. It was very Art Deco, all mirrored, and then all these ostrich plumes, like black ostrich plumes, and the colors that they had were colors you had never seen before. Like here in America, you know, you had blue eyeshadow, green eyeshadow, but she had plum and teal and black, and so it was just so inspiring. And then all the packaging was black and very Art Deco too.
Perfume?
My first fragrance that I wore, it was King Kong, and it was designed by Kenzo. And I liked the name and I liked the fragrance. And when they decided they were going to stop making it, I went to Bloomingdale's and bought 2 shopping bags full of King Kong for $9.99 a bottle. And I still have those bottles.
Still have them? And have they not turned to pure alcohol?
I'm sure they did.
That's fun. Style icons?
Style icons, I mean, Lulu de la Falaise, Anita Pallenberg. Today's her birthday, actually. Marissa Berenson. You know, I think that, you know, they were all so lucky to be dressed by some of the most amazing designers in the world. But Anita actually had such an eye that she inspired a lot of designers. She worked for Marc for a while. She worked for Vivienne Westwood. And I mean, she created the Stones look, so which is now the quintessential rock and roll look.
I'm doing a talk at the Y in about 10 days about the book on Lulu and Eve, on the tragic how she died. And Lulu de la Falaise was the Yves Saint Laurent muse and was not treated well at the end by the House of Saint Laurent after he died. So it's like a big controversial book. Warhol superstars, I guess we kind of went there. Films, favorite movies?
Again, I love Elizabeth Taylor, so anything with Elizabeth Taylor in it. Performance, Anita's movie with Mick.
Did you like Elizabeth because she had purple eyes?
Yeah, purple eyes, black hair, white skin, you know, and then she was Cleopatra.
No.
I mean.
Museum, any favorite museums?
I love the Victoria and Albert because I like the aesthetic movement, Art Nouveau, Victorian, and like they specialize in all of that.
And books? What do you like to read?
You know, it's funny when I was in 7th grade, like I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and my teacher gave me an A on the paper, but said you have to stop reading these childish books, and I never stopped reading those childish books.
Don't ever stop reading them. Social media. Are you a big fan of social media? Do you like Instagram, follow it, watch it?
I do Instagram. I'm guilty of like looking at it a couple times a day. I think it has a value, but maybe it's too strong right now.
Yeah, we all need a technological detox.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's next for Anna Sui? The business and the person?
Well, we just moved offices after 20 years, so it's been really exciting and also challenging to fit 20 years of stuff into like a smaller space. So my office is just filled with boxes right now. I just did a collaboration with Marc Jacobs, so those products will be out. I think they debut in May. So that was really a lot of fun because, we're such good friends. And actually, it's funny, we used to go to events together, and the photographers would always call me Annie Sue because they didn't know how to pronounce my name. And so he became Marky Sue, and I'm Annie Sue. So kind of like we were playing on that in the collaboration.
So is it a ready-to-wear collection? What is
There's some T-shirts, handbags, accessories, kind of like the stuff that Mark is known for, especially the Mark by Mark, but really playful. Really
And
playful.
it was always fun to go to Anna's show and see Mark sitting in the front row watching it, because in America, you never see designers at each other's shows, but Mark, for so many years, was always at your show.
Yeah.
Did you follow his getting married on Instagram this
I
week
did.
at Chipotle?
How amazing, yeah.
Did you all see that?
Yeah.
Marc Jacobs was proposed and got engaged at Chipotle,
yeah.
and it was kind of set up with the whole audience,
flash
everybody
mob,
there's
yeah.
the flash mob singing
Yeah.
and dancing. Follow Marc Jacobs and you could see it. It's a lot of fun. That's great. So is there a difference between Anna Sui, the business, and Anna Sui, the person?
I don't think so. I think it's all one. Yeah, it seems like it.
Well, I think it's a remarkable business, a remarkable career that you've had. Let's open the floor for a couple of questions, because we have that for about 10 minutes, I think. Okay, right up front.
I would love some advice from you. Thank you so much for sharing.
Is the mic around? Here, wait.
I think it's just
Why don't you
coming.
use that?
Well,
Hi,
I
Anna.
think a lot of what I've been talking about today is, I think that it's really important to have that identifiable brand. I think that has been the secret of my success, the fact that any product that I do is undeniably Anna Sui. I think that I have to put as much into a tube of lipstick as I do into a dress, because I want the customer to have that same thrill. I want them to come away with the same feeling of the purchase, of the transporting, with the fantasy behind it. I think that's always been my belief, and that's what we do with every product that we do.
Thank you so much for coming. Your talk is really inspirational.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
My name's Natalie,
Hi.
and I just graduated a year ago out of design school, being a fashion designer. So I guess my question is, hearing you talk about, how you've traveled and you're at this brand, and it's really inspiring, and I have all these dreams, but I'm at the point where I'm like, how did you start your career, and how did you start reaching out to your first jobs? Like, maybe what was your first job, or how did you kind of get your foot in the door? Because I find that that's where I'm at right now, and I'm like,
What I've always been
hard.
told is I have a lot of chutzpah. I think, I got hired my second year of Parsons. I got hired before the semester ended, because I overheard two seniors that were talking about a job opportunity, and it was a designer that I loved. It was a collection called Charlie's Girls, which nobody knows today, but I loved what they did. I ran up there with my portfolio from school, and I got the job. So, it's like you have to react. You have to react. When I was opening my boutique in Los Angeles, I got a phone call from Franca Sozzani, and she said, "Anne, I have a job for you." And I said, "Where?" She said, "Italy." And I was on the plane the next day, and that was my freelance, and which opened up the world to me, because
Is that Iceberg?
Yeah, it was Iceberg, yeah. And because I had only ever worked in New York, but suddenly working in Italy, you have all the artisans, all the most incredible fabrics, embroideries, and also led to the shoe license that I had for 12 years. So, you just never know what door is going to open, but you have to be ready for it.
Be flexible.
You can't be afraid, and you can't say, well, I'm going to think about
ready
it.
for that.
Like, I never thought about it. I just did it.
Or what's it going to pay me?
Yeah. You don't
do
think
it.
about, oh, I'm going on vacation. Oh, you can't throw any obstacles. And the same thing happened in Japan. I don't speak Japanese. I'm not Japanese. Usually, in fact, they said a Chinese designer will never make it in Japan. I've been there. I'm celebrating my 25th year there. So, it's just, you have to not throw those obstacles out there. You just have to be ready to react. But there's sacrifices too. You have to decide what's more important for you.
Thank you.
Next.
Thanks for coming today. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. So in success stories, we often hear about the end, and we never get to hear about the journey. So what's maybe a time you experienced failure and what you learned from it?
Failure. I don't know if I ever look at it that way. When like a door closes, another one opens. So when a license ends, something else comes along. I think that, I don't know, I think I don't believe in that word. Not everything works out, not everything is a success, but there's always something else. And I think that's the way you have to look at it. And learn from your mistakes, learn from what didn't work, and try it another way. And I think that's the other thing that I always try to convince my staff to kind of respond to, is that you hear no so much. And if I would have taken every no that was thrown my way, I'd still be in Detroit. It's like, I think that you have to find another way to do it. You have to come at it a different way. You have to kind of psych out the situation. It's like there's always a different approach and a different person to talk to, a different person that's going to say yes. I think all those things are such important life lessons, not only just to be a designer, but in life in general.
And I'm going to shamelessly plug my book, because if you read the interviews in the book, they're all about designers who started with absolutely nothing. Nobody handed them a job or a family business and said, take this over. It's all about how did they create something from nothing, from a passion, and how did they grow it, and where did they screw up, and how did they get back on track, how did they do it. And when I interviewed Marc Jacobs in New York at the 92nd Street Y, I looked out at the audience and I said, have you heard what he just said? This is the 4th time they went bankrupt. Bankrupt. And I said, are you still working with your same lawyers? And he said, yes. And he got back in the saddle and started another business. I mean, you just do it.
I just want to say you're one of my heroes.
Oh, thank you.
Like,
Thanks.
your work is it for me. I guess I'm just curious about your transition from Detroit to New York City. Like, what was that like?
It was almost no transition.
Yeah. Like, was it easy,
graduated from
or?
high school, but I had already been accepted at Parsons.
Nice.
So just,
Was it like a fun time? Was it like?
it was the
or was it, like,
70s
work?
with no parental guidance. What do you think?
Yeah. Fun. And I mean, were you obviously you were very motivated to work and succeed. Did you find that easy to navigate, or was it, obviously there are hurdles when you live in New York City. So.
Yeah, but again, I think I was so ambitious and excited and
curious and
curious,
interested in
yeah.
learning.
I think that, if I wanted to get in a club, I got in a club.
Yeah.
If I wanted to go to, a restaurant, I got there, like invited or whatever. It's just, if I wanted to go to an opening, I went. So it was just like there was no obstacles. I mean, especially in your 20s, like you don't understand that
fearless.
there's boundaries. Yeah.
And I think that's really the trick is just it's all in the mind. If
Yeah.
you feel that you can and you believe that you can, you will. And I think that's why, this resonates with everybody, is that like you have lived your dream, and it's very inspiring. Thank you.
She is living her dream. She didn't live
you.
it. It's not over yet.
Yes, it's just, it's very inspiring because it's coming from such a beautiful, pure place.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, one more over here on the aisle.
So as a fan of Art Deco and Victorian furniture, is there anything that's gone out of style, like corsets or like umbrellas, that you wish came back and you wish you could incorporate, but it's too outlandish now?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not one that changes what I love because of what's in style. So you can tell when there's minimalism, I'm still doing like overness. You know, it's like it's just how I am. I think that I'm trying to think, because going through like the 20 years of stuff that I've accumulated, all of a sudden I'm dragging those same pillows home that I put away 20 years ago because I still love them. You know, so I don't think I'm that way. And you can tell that in my design, like that it really hasn't changed since my first show. It's always inspired by rock and roll and 60s and 70s and rock star kind of feeling. You know, there's always all those elements. Of course, I have to spin it a different way every season.
It always feels fresh.
Which is the challenge. But I don't know that I ever, like what I absolutely love ever really changed.
And umbrellas are going to be back because Mary Poppins is opening soon.
Yeah, true. It's a good point.
Okay, yes, in the back, and I think that's our last question.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering about school. I mean, I know what you're saying, that you moved to New York and you met people and you got your first job at school, but like as far as the education part, you must have had so much natural talent too, so I was just wondering, like, do you feel like you needed that, or you did need it just for a foundation?
I wasn't the most talented in school, but I'm one of the few that actually became a designer. So it's not just that. You know, it's like there were so many people that were far better designers, drapers, pattern makers, like all that. So I think that it's a package. Like it's not just one thing. I think Madonna's a good example. You have to have that drive and the willingness to sacrifice other things for what you want. I think those are the keys, really. Like you can't say, I want to be just a designer, but you know, I like science too. So maybe I'm going to take some science and some design. It doesn't happen that way. Very rarely does it happen that way. I can't say it never happened that way, but I think it's like Mark. He wanted to be a designer. No matter what,
Nothing was going to stop him.
Yeah, and that's because the competition is so stiff. I mean, when I graduated, the graduating class was 35. Now it's 350. And when I graduated, there was a thriving garment business in New York.
It's like 4,000 at FIT.
Yeah, like thousands of jobs. Now there's a handful of jobs. So you tell me what's going to make the success, not how talented you are, it's the drive.
Yeah, what's going to separate you? What's going to get you noticed, and how are you going to do it that captures somebody's attention? You know, and you all do have, you know, this horrible thing in our hands every day that really has changed the way you can do business. You don't even have to be in a store anymore. You know, more people are selling collections off Instagram. You know, you could do anything. You have to just be clever.
And that's the thing. Everyone does it their own way. You can't, Calvin did it this way, so I'm going to copy Calvin, because there's only one Calvin Klein. You know, it's like you have to figure out your own way, but behind it you need that drive. I think that that's really the secret.
Yeah, and there is always room for somebody new on the sphere. Virgil Abloh, Heron Preston, people coming out of nowhere virtually, and just like this at the top of the game now. So with those inspiring notes, we hope you all will follow your dreams and have successful careers, and we hope we see you all at Anna's show tomorrow night. Yes?
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, Fern. You're the best. Thank you.